They say every person carries a darkness inside them, an instinct, a buried urge, a version of themselves they hope never wakes up. You open with the idea that some shadows don't come from outside, but from within, growing quietly in the corners of the mind until they become something separate, something hungry. You explain that the case of Daniel Mercer is terrifying not because he was a killer, but because he insisted the killer wasn't him at all. It was something that lived beneath his skin, something he called the Nefastus. The hook deepens when you reveal that the night Daniel walked into the police station drenched in blood, he looked more confused than guilty, trembling as he said, "I tried to stop him. But he's stronger now." Moments later, authorities learned that 3 murders had been committed across town at the exact same time Daniel was seen on camera inside a gas station miles away. The figures didn't add up, the timeline was impossible, and Daniel's panic wasn't the panic of a murderer, it was the panic of someone being hunted from the inside. You move into the intro by explaining that Daniel had been an unremarkable man his whole life, quiet job, small apartment, no enemies, no criminal record. But when investigators dug deeper, they discovered unsettling traces of a presence that seemed to follow him from childhood. Neighbors remembered Daniel as the boy who talked to shadows in corners. Teachers recalled the strange black smudges that would appear on his desk whenever he got upset. Daniel himself admitted that whenever he felt anger or fear, he sensed something standing behind him, close enough to feel its breath, but invisible unless he looked into a mirror, and even then, he saw only a distorted outline. He had always dismissed it as imagination, until the murders began happening during moments he couldn't remember, moments he felt himself slip and something colder, sharper, stepped forward. As you describe this, you emphasize that the idea behind the Nefastus isn't possession, it isn't a demon taking over. It is the darkest version of a person, weaponized and alive, using their emotions as a doorway. Daniel's life became a battle against a reflection that didn't want to stay inside the glass, and the night he surrendered to the police, he believed he wasn't turning himself in. He was warning the world that the killer wasn't him at all, but the thing waiting patiently in the spaces between his thoughts. Investigators began piecing together Daniel's life from the moment he confessed, and the deeper they looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. You describe how Daniel's earliest medical records mentioned night terrors so severe that doctors believed he was suffering from hallucinations, yet the strange part was that the terrors always happened during moments of emotional stress, after a fight at school, after losing a pet, after seeing his parents argue. Each time, Daniel claimed he saw a man made of smoke standing beside his bed, leaning over him with a crooked posture as though listening to his heartbeat. As Daniel grew older, these visions didn't fade, they evolved. He told therapists that whenever he felt anger, especially sudden bursts, his reflection would blur, darken, and shift, becoming taller and thinner for just a second before snapping back. Daniel tried to ignore it for years, but those who knew him said strange things always happened when he got upset. Lights flickered, temperatures dropped, objects fell without being touched. Police later recovered old home videos showing a young Daniel blowing out his birthday candles, and as he smiled, the tall shadow of an adult figure passed behind him even though neither of his parents had moved. You then explained the first murder linked to Daniel. A coworker he disliked was found dead in his home, his heart ruptured as though crushed from the inside, but no external wound existed. Daniel denied being anywhere near the man's house, and security footage proved he was across town buying groceries at the exact time of death. Yet on the footage, right as Daniel looks frustrated at the checkout line, the camera flickers for one frame, revealing a thin, elongated figure standing behind him, watching with hollow, static-like eyes. Forensic tests on the victim revealed traces of a strange black residue inside the throat material that behaved like ash but carried no chemical signature. As more murders occurred, a pattern formed. Each victim had either wronged Daniel or triggered an emotional response in him. Investigators realized the killings aligned perfectly with Daniel's emotional spikes. When he felt rage, fear, guilt, the murders happened. When he was calm, the killings stopped. It was as if the Nefastus fed on Daniel's darkest emotions, growing stronger each time he lost control. Then you take viewers into the interrogation room. Daniel sat at the table, exhausted and shaking, and every time an officer raised their voice, the lights dimmed. He begged them not to provoke him. At one point, as an officer slammed a folder on the table, Daniel's eyes rolled back and he went completely still. The temperature dropped instantly. Cameras captured a shape forming behind him, a long arm stretching across the wall as though reaching for the officer. The officer felt a sharp pain in his chest, collapsed, and later died from cardiac arrest with the same internal burn pattern as previous victims. When Daniel snapped out of his trance, he cried hysterically, saying, "I told you not to make me angry. He comes out when I break." From that point on, every interview had to be conducted through glass, and Daniel remained terrified of his own reflection. Investigators searched Daniel's apartment and uncovered dozens of drawings of a tall, faceless figure with ribs showing through its skin and long fingers that tapered to points. In each drawing, the creature was standing behind Daniel's sketch of himself. In the margins, Daniel had written, "He grows when I lie, he breathes when I cry, and he smiles when I hate." The truly chilling discovery was a video diary on Daniel's laptop. In it, Daniel filmed himself explaining how the Nefastus wasn't a hallucination but a manifestation of everything rotten inside me. As he spoke, his reflection in the background delayed its movements by a half-second and tilted its head at an impossible angle. At the end of the video, Daniel whispered, "If he gets out completely, I won't exist anymore." The turning point came when specialists attempted a psychological stress test on Daniel, hoping to study the entity's behavior. Daniel was placed in a sterile room with white walls, surrounded by cameras and thermal sensors. They asked him to recount the night of the murders. As Daniel grew emotional, something began to appear on the thermal imaging, a second figure, cold as ice, leaning over Daniel's shoulder. Suddenly, the creature's arm extended across the room, and the glass observation window cracked as if struck by tremendous force. Every camera cut to static, and a guard outside screamed before collapsing. When power was restored moments later, Daniel was curled in the corner, whispering, "He's learning how to stay." Experts concluded that the Nefastus wasn't he attached to Daniel in a traditional sense. It was born from him, shaped by his repressed anger, trauma, and guilt. A living shadow, a psychological parasite with its own identity. But the most terrifying discovery came from the final footage recorded of Daniel in his cell. He stood in front of the mirror, whispering, "You're not me," over and over. For a moment, his reflection stopped mirroring his movements, lifted its head slowly, and smiled with a mouth Daniel didn't have. The next second, the mirror shattered from the inside, and Daniel vanished from the camera's view. When guards rushed in, the cell was empty except for a charred handprint on the wall and a message scratched into the concrete: "He walks free." In the end, everything circles back to the same haunting realization that the true terror was never out there but always waiting beneath your own skin, patient and hungry. As the last traces of the Nefastus flicker at the edges of your mind, you try convincing yourself that the ordeal is over, that the voice you heard was just a psychological break, that the shadows moving in your peripheral vision are nothing more than exhaustion. But deep down, a part of you knows that once something like this enters you, once it learns your patterns, your weaknesses, your darkest impulses, it never truly leaves. You feel a quiet, rhythmic pulse somewhere just behind your ribs, like a second heartbeat sensing itself with yours, stronger with every beat. You tell yourself to breathe, to calm down, to focus, yet even your thoughts feel slightly crowded. And as you stare into the camera or the mirror, trying to reassure your audience or maybe yourself that the nightmare is finally over, your lips curl into a faint, involuntary twitch, a smile that isn't yours. The room grows colder, the lights dim just a little, and in the heavy silence you hear a soft whisper, not from the outside but from within, "Ready for the next one." And that's when the truth hits you. It was never about surviving the Nefastus. It was about becoming it.